Jessica and her two young children, Lily and Aiden, lived in a house most neighbors avoided. Behind the faded curtains and overgrown lawn, a nightmare was unfolding, a loaded gun resting atop Lily's favorite DVD disc, roaches crawling across the kitchen floor, and a mother whose Instagram life hid a dangerous secret. What happened inside this Florida home would shock everyone who thought they knew her. In the sweltering heat of a Florida summer, the small house at the end of Maple Street seemed almost invisible, tucked behind overgrown hedges and peeling paint. Neighbors had long noticed the pile of mail stacking up on the porch, the rattling screen door that never seemed to close, and the faint, sour odor that hung in the air like a warning. For weeks, no one had seen Jessica, the mother who lived there with her two children, Lily and Aiden. Rumors swirled through the neighborhood about her erratic behavior, but most people kept their distance, chalking it up to private struggles. That distance ended the day deputies arrived for a routine welfare check. The officers entered the home cautiously, the door creaking loudly as it opened. Inside, the smell hit them first, a mixture of rotting food, mildew, and something metallic they couldn't identify immediately. The living room was a chaos of unwashed laundry, broken toys, and food wrappers that had long since lost any resemblance to their original form. A thick layer of dust covered the furniture, and cockroaches scurried along the baseboards and ceiling corners, disappearing into cracks as the officers moved. In the middle of this squalor, a stack of children's DVD discs lay on the floor, a small beacon of what should have been normal childhood entertainment. Atop the pile rested a loaded handgun. The officers froze for a moment, understanding immediately how close disaster had come. The children, barely old enough to walk steadily, played within feet of the weapon. Their toys were scattered across the floor, and the faint hum of flies filled the silence. Each item in the room told a story of neglect, danger, and a life spiraling out of control. In the kitchen, the scene was equally grim. Sticky surfaces were covered with crumbs and old spills. Cabinets opened to reveal empty or expired food containers, and more cockroaches darted between the cracks in the countertops. The refrigerator emitted a sour, acidic smell that made the officers recoil. Evidence of prolonged neglect was everywhere, from the mold growing on bathroom tiles to the stained carpet in the hallway. Every corner of the house seemed to vibrate with tension, as if warning anyone who entered that this was a home frozen in decay. Outside, the summer sun did little to soften the reality within the walls. The air was heavy, humid, and oppressive, pressing down on the deputies as they worked. From their vantage point, the yard seemed like an extension of the chaos inside, littered with broken toys, rusted bicycles, and trash that had been left to rot for weeks. The children's footprints, smudged into the dirt and grime, told a silent story of innocence trapped in neglect. As the welfare check continued, it became clear that this house was not just a warning sign, it was a disaster waiting to happen. Every object, from the DVD disc to the scattered utensils, seemed to speak of a mother struggling to maintain control, a home teetering on the edge, and children unknowingly exposed to a world of danger. The loaded gun on the DVD disc was not just an accident, it was a symbol of everything wrong in this household, a tangible reminder of how quickly innocence can be overshadowed by chaos. By the time social workers and law enforcement fully assessed the home, the picture was undeniable. Jessica's life had unraveled in silence, leaving behind a scene that would haunt the neighborhood and raise urgent questions about how such danger could go unnoticed for so long. Jessica was a woman whose public image clashed violently with the reality of her life. In photos posted on social media, she appeared vibrant and cheerful, always smiling at the camera with her children by her side. Friends and acquaintances saw only the curated glimpses of her life, birthday parties, school events, and family vacations. Her Instagram feed suggested a picture-perfect existence, but behind those images, the story was entirely different. Close friends described her as erratic and unpredictable, often disappearing for days without explanation, leaving anyone who cared for her worried and uncertain. Her reputation in the neighborhood was mixed. Some remembered her as warm and engaging when she was present, while others had grown wary over time. Jessica had always seemed overwhelmed, unable to maintain routines that most families took for granted. Bills went unpaid, eviction notices arrived regularly, and minor legal issues accumulated, painting a picture of a woman teetering on the edge. There were periods when she appeared to be holding everything together, but those moments were fleeting, like the calm before a storm. Investigators who later studied her life found a pattern of instability. She had a history of minor offenses that, on paper, seemed inconsequential, but when combined with her neglect of the household and children, they suggested a woman struggling to cope with the responsibilities of daily life. The loaded handgun discovered in her home was legally registered to her, yet it had been left carelessly atop a pile of DVDs meant for her children's entertainment. The danger it represented was staggering, but it seemed, in her mind, almost inconsequential, a symbol of how disconnected she had become from reality. Jessica's behavior also revealed an underlying isolation. Neighbors reported that she rarely interacted with others unless necessary, and even friends found it difficult to reach her during her more chaotic periods. She had limited support systems, and the few people who tried to intervene often encountered resistance or denial. The contrast between her online presence and her real life was striking, illustrating how she had constructed a facade that masked the disarray inside her home. Her children, Lily and Aiden, were caught in the middle of this turmoil. Jessica's inability to maintain stability directly impacted their well-being. Social workers would later note that she frequently ignored basic needs, from nutrition and hygiene to supervision and safety. The house was filled with hazards, broken appliances, infestations, and structural decay, yet she continued to inhabit it as if these conditions were normal. It was a reality shaped by neglect, compounded by her inconsistent attention and increasingly erratic behavior. Throughout the investigation, it became evident that Jessica's challenges were more than a matter of poor choices. Mental health struggles likely played a role, intertwined with her apparent desire to maintain appearances at all costs. The careful curation of her social media life masked months, perhaps years, of mounting problems that eventually reached a breaking point. Behind the cheerful photos and smiling posts was a woman trapped in a cycle of instability, isolation, and denial, unable to protect the children who depended on her most. By the time authorities pieced together the full extent of her household's conditions, Jessica's life had become a stark cautionary tale. She embodied the fragile line between maintaining appearances and confronting harsh realities, a line that, when crossed, left those most vulnerable exposed to danger and neglect. The deeper investigators looked, the clearer it became that her story was not just about poor parenting, it was about a life unraveling quietly, dangerously, and almost invisibly to those around her. Lily and Aiden were two young children living in a world most people would find unimaginable. At just 6 and 3 years old, they had already experienced neglect and danger in ways no child should endure. When social workers first entered the house, the sight of them was jarring. Their hair was matted and tangled, their skin marked with scratches, insect bites, and bruises that told stories of days spent unsupervised and unprotected. Their clothes were stained and damp, evidence of spills and accidents left unattended for days. Yet, despite their appearance, there was a strange resilience in the children, a sense of cautious normalcy in the chaos that surrounded them. The children's toys were scattered across the floor, a mix of well-loved stuffed animals and broken plastic figures. Among them, the DV-disc with the loaded gun sitting on top had been only one of the hazards they navigated daily. The home was a labyrinth of danger disguised as everyday living space. Every step they took could have led to injury, every corner harbored pests, and every room carried a potential threat. Still, they played as best they could, unaware of the full extent of the risks, their small hands brushing past cockroaches and debris as if it were part of the world they knew. School reports painted a bleak picture of what was happening outside the house. Teachers noticed Lily and Aiden arriving tired, hungry, and unkempt, often with unexplained bruises and sores. Their concentration in class was poor, and social interactions were limited. The children were polite but withdrawn, speaking little about their home life. Multiple reports had been filed with Child Protective Services over the years, but each intervention had failed to create lasting change. For months, the children had remained in the care of a mother unable or unwilling to provide a safe and stable environment. Social workers noted subtle but disturbing signs of the children adapting to their environment. Lily, the older of the two, had learned to navigate the hazards of the home with care, moving quickly around puddles, broken objects, and crawling roaches. Aiden, younger and less aware of the dangers, followed his sister's lead, trusting her instinctively. Both children exhibited signs of developmental delay, likely linked to poor nutrition, chronic stress, and lack of proper stimulation. Their innocence remained intact in some ways, yet it was overshadowed by the harsh reality they were forced to endure every day. Medical examinations confirmed the extent of their physical neglect. Both children were underweight for their age, with weakened immune systems and skin conditions exacerbated by the infestation and filth in their home. Doctors warned that prolonged exposure to such environments could have long-term physical and psychological consequences, from stunted growth to trauma-related anxiety and behavioral issues. The loaded gun and constant presence of unsafe conditions only amplified the risks they faced. Despite all of this, the children had formed small pockets of safety within the chaos. A stuffed animal, a corner of the living room, or a DVD they had managed to keep clean became a fragile shield from the overwhelming neglect. These small objects were their anchors in a world that should have been secure and nurturing. Each day they survived was a quiet testament to their resilience and instinct for self-preservation, though the danger surrounding them remained ever present, hidden in plain sight, waiting for a moment when tragedy could strike. By the time authorities fully assessed the situation, it was clear that Lily and Aiden had been living in a life far removed from what any child should know. Their world was defined by danger, neglect, and uncertainty, yet beneath it all, the spark of their childhood remained, fragile but unbroken, clinging to whatever small comforts they could find in a home that had failed them completely. Once Jessica was taken into custody, the investigation into her home and life intensified. Authorities combed through every inch of the house, documenting not just the obvious hazards but the subtle signs of neglect that had accumulated over months, perhaps years. The cockroach infestation was severe, with insects found in every room, behind furniture, and inside cupboards. The walls were streaked with grime, sticky residue clung to countertops, and the floors were littered with debris. Investigators photographed the loaded handgun sitting atop the children's DVD disc, the juxtaposition of danger and innocence striking them with an almost visceral shock. Forensic teams meticulously cataloged every potential risk. Broken electrical outlets, exposed wiring, and leaking pipes added layers of danger that went beyond the gun or the pests. Investigators found spoiled food hidden in cabinets and a refrigerator filled with containers of unidentifiable substances, some crawling with insects. The bathroom showed signs of prolonged neglect, with mold covering the tiles, a clogged sink, and filthy towels. Each element of the home told a story. Not just of a mother who had failed her children, but of a household consumed by chaos that had been allowed to exist unchecked. During interviews with neighbors and acquaintances, authorities uncovered a chilling pattern. Several people admitted they had suspected something was wrong for months, even years, but fear, denial, or uncertainty kept them from taking action. Complaints and whispers circulated, but no one had pressed hard enough to intervene effectively. The situation revealed how communities can overlook danger, particularly when outward appearances, like Jessica's social media presence, suggest normalcy. Jessica herself presented a confusing portrait. She claimed she never intended harm, insisting that the gun's placement had been an oversight and that her children were safe. Her statements conflicted sharply with the physical evidence, which suggested sustained neglect and a lack of supervision that had placed her children in imminent danger. Investigators struggled to reconcile her claims with the reality of the home, a place where hazards were not occasional but constant, embedded in every corner and every object. Evidence from the investigation suggested that Jessica had been living in isolation, cut off from support systems that might have prevented such severe neglect. Family members, friends, and neighbors described her as increasingly withdrawn, her behavior growing more unpredictable over time. Social workers found records showing previous interventions, none of which had led to long-term improvements. Each failed attempt at support underscored the difficulty of identifying and addressing chronic neglect before it escalates to crisis. The case also highlighted the intersection of mental health, socioeconomic stress, and parental responsibility. Jessica's struggles were not just legal issues. They were human problems, reflecting a life unraveling under pressure. Experts reviewing the evidence noted signs of depression, anxiety, and possible untreated mental health conditions contributing to her inability to provide a safe environment. By the end of the investigation, the picture was clear. Jessica's household had become a ticking time bomb, one that had gone unnoticed until authorities finally intervened. Every detail of the home, every account from neighbors and friends, painted a stark image of a mother overwhelmed by circumstances, a household neglected to the point of danger, and children forced to navigate a world that should have been safe. The loaded gun atop the DV disc was merely the most visible symbol of a much deeper and more pervasive crisis that had taken root inside the walls of that Florida home. The aftermath of Jessica's arrest sent ripples through the small Florida community. Social workers immediately placed Lily and Aiden in temporary foster care, where they were finally provided with clean clothes, nutritious meals, and safe surroundings. For the first time in months, the children experienced stability, but the trauma they had endured was not easily erased. The psychological effects of living in a home filled with neglect, infestation, and danger would follow them for years. Experts noted that children like Lily and Aiden often struggle with trust, attachment, and emotional regulation, and they would require extensive therapy to recover from the environment they had known as normal. Authorities continued to document the conditions of Jessica's home, each new discovery more alarming than the last. Inside drawers, investigators found roaches crawling over personal belongings, food containers, and even children's school supplies. Evidence suggested that the infestation had persisted for months without intervention. Structural issues were revealed as walls crumbled. Water damage spread across ceilings, and flooring weakened under prolonged neglect. The home itself became a symbol of the hazards hidden in plain sight, a testament to what can happen when warning signs go unheeded. The legal case against Jessica unfolded with intensity. Prosecutors argued that her neglect went far beyond ordinary oversight, citing the loaded handgun left within reach of the children as a central example of her recklessness. They emphasized that the environment she maintained was not only unsanitary but actively dangerous, posing immediate physical and emotional risks. Defense teams attempted to contextualize her actions, highlighting mental health struggles and personal hardships, but the evidence of sustained neglect overshadowed these claims. Public reaction to the case was a mixture of outrage and sorrow. Neighbors expressed disbelief that such conditions could exist so close to their own homes, while advocacy groups used the incident to call attention to the challenges of identifying and addressing child neglect before it escalates. Many were shocked to learn that multiple warning signs had been reported over the years, yet intervention had failed to prevent the children from living in such perilous conditions. The story became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the vulnerability of children and the responsibilities society holds to protect them. As Lily and Aiden began their journey of recovery, authorities worked to stabilize their lives. Therapy sessions addressed the trauma, focusing on rebuilding a sense of safety and normalcy. Teachers and foster parents took careful steps to support their education and social development, aware that the road to healing would be long and filled with challenges. Each small milestone: eating a balanced meal, engaging in play without fear, sleeping through the night, was a victory against the years of neglect they had endured. The home on Maple Street was eventually condemned and cleared of its infestation, but its story remained etched in public memory. Jessica's actions, whether driven by mental health struggles, isolation, or negligence, had created a household fraught with danger and suffering. The loaded gun on top of the children's DV disc became a chilling symbol of how quickly domestic hazards can escalate when oversight and care are absent. In the end, the case was more than a tale of neglect. It was a stark lesson about the fragility of safety, the hidden struggles behind appearances, and the resilience of children who survive against overwhelming odds.